The day I realized my son-in-law didn't respect me was the same day I found out he'd been lying to my daughter for years. I stood in my own kitchen, the kitchen I'd designed 30 years ago when Robert and I built this house, and listened as Travis told me I was no longer welcome to Sunday dinners. "Margaret," he said, not even bothering to look up from his phone, "Jenny and I think it's best if you give us some space on weekends. The kids need structure, not grandma spoiling them with cookies and undermining our parenting." I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling the smooth granite beneath my fingertips. The same granite I'd selected when renovating 5 years ago after Robert passed. This was my home, my sanctuary. And here was this 38-year-old man, 22 years my junior, telling me I wasn't welcome in it. "Travis," I said carefully, measuring my words the way I'd learned to do during my 30 years as an elementary school principal. "This is my house. I've invited you and Jenny and the children to live here temporarily while you get back on your feet. I'm not sure you're in a position to dictate when I can be in my own kitchen." He finally looked up from his phone, his expression a mixture of annoyance and condescension that I'd grown accustomed to over the past 6 months. "Actually, Jenny and I have been talking, and we think it would be better if you moved into the guest house. The main house has 4 bedrooms, and we need the space. It makes more sense for one person to take the smaller space, don't you think?" The audacity struck me speechless. 6 months ago, when Jenny called me in tears because Travis had lost his job and they couldn't make their mortgage payments, I'd offered them refuge. My daughter, her husband, and my 2 grandchildren, Ellie, age 7, and Max, age 5, moved into my home while they sorted things out. I'd even suggested Travis use this time to find a job he truly loved rather than rushing into another position he'd hate. Now, half a year later, Travis spent his days networking at the golf course while my daughter worked overtime as a nurse. And he had the nerve to suggest I move out of my own bedroom? "I'd like to discuss this with both of you." "She's on shift until 9 tonight," Travis replied, already turning his attention back to his phone. "But we're in agreement on this. It's decided." That's when I saw it, the notification that flashed across his phone screen before he quickly turned it away. A message from someone named Amber with a string of heart emojis. Perhaps he thought at 60 years old, my eyesight had deteriorated too much to notice. He was wrong. I'd been suspicious for weeks. The late-night networking events, the password suddenly appearing on his phone, the mysterious weekend golf tournaments that Jenny wasn't invited to attend. But seeing it confirmed sent a chill through me. My daughter was working 12-hour shifts to support this family, while Travis was apparently pursuing extracurricular activities. He didn't even acknowledge my response. I retreated to my bedroom, the master suite that Travis and Jenny had graciously allowed me to keep when they moved in, and closed the door. For 30 minutes, I sat on the edge of my bed, the same spot where I'd held Robert's hand during his final days. What would he have done in this situation? Robert never tolerated disrespect, but he also believed in giving people the opportunity to correct their mistakes. My cell phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was my best friend, Diane. "How's the full house?" she asked cheerfully. "Increasingly complicated," I replied, keeping my voice low. "Travis just informed me that I should move into the guest house so they can have the main house to themselves." Diane's gasp was audible. "He did what?" "Margaret, that house is in your name. You and Robert paid it off 15 years ago." "I'm well aware," I said, a plan already forming in my mind. "Diane, can you do me a favor? I need you to pick me up in about an hour. I think it's time I consulted with Frank." Frank Harmon had been our family attorney for decades. He'd handled Robert's will, helped me with tax planning, and had repeatedly told me to call if I ever needed anything. I suspected he'd find the situation very interesting indeed. "And Margaret, don't let that ungrateful man-child push you around. This isn't just about the house, it's about respect." After hanging up, I opened my closet and pulled out the fireproof box where I kept all my important documents. Inside was the deed to the house, Robert's will, insurance policies, and most importantly, at this moment, the informal rental agreement I'd had Jenny and Travis sign when they moved in. Robert had always said I was too trusting, too willing to believe the best in people. but he'd also taught me to be practical. The agreement stated clearly that they were temporary occupants, not tenants, and that their stay was contingent upon my approval. I had included this language specifically to protect myself if things went south. I never imagined I'd need to use it against my own family. As I waited for Diane, I heard the front door open and the sound of my grandchildren's voices. They must have been dropped off by the after-school program coordinator. I tucked the documents into my purse and went to greet them. Ellie ran to me immediately, throwing her small arms around my waist. "Grandma, I made you something in art class." She proudly held up a watercolor painting of what appeared to be two people holding hands. "That's you and me," she explained, pointing to the figures. "And that's our house." Max approached more cautiously, his eyes darting toward the living room where I could hear Travis watching golf on the television I'd purchased. "Hi, Grandma," he said quietly. "Can we have cookies?" "Of course you can," I replied, leading them both into the kitchen. "I made snickerdoodles this morning." As I placed cookies on plates for them, Travis appeared in the doorway. "They don't need sweets before dinner," he said sharply. "Kids, go do your homework." Ellie's face fell, and Max looked down at his feet. Neither moved to take the cookies. "They just got home from school," I said evenly. "A small snack won't hurt them." Travis crossed his arms. "We've talked about this, Margaret. You undermine our parenting every chance you get." I smiled at my grandchildren. "Why don't you take your cookies to the den? I have some special paper for drawing in the desk drawer." They looked uncertainly between Travis and me before quickly grabbing their plates and scurrying off. Once they were out of earshot, I turned to my son-in-law. "Travis, I've been thinking about what you said earlier. You're right that this living arrangement isn't working optimally." I saw a look of satisfaction cross his face, which quickly disappeared as I continued. "So I've decided to consult with my attorney about the best way to proceed for everyone involved." "On the contrary," I replied calmly, "when it comes to property and living arrangements, it's always best to have proper legal guidance. Diane will be here shortly to pick me up for my appointment." "I'm not making it a whole thing, Travis. I'm simply ensuring that everyone's rights and responsibilities are clear. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get ready for my appointment." I left him standing in the kitchen, his mouth slightly open in surprise. As I changed my clothes, I heard him on the phone, presumably calling Jenny. Good. They needed to discuss this together. Diane arrived precisely on time, as she always did. A retired judge, she had little patience for nonsense and even less for disrespect. When I slid into the passenger seat of her Lexus, she took one look at my face and nodded approvingly. "You've got your battle face on," she observed. "What's the plan?" "First, I need to understand my legal options," I explained as she pulled away from the curb. "Then, I need to have an honest conversation with Jenny without Travis present." "And what about the grandkids?" Diane asked, always practical. "They're my primary concern," I admitted. "Whatever happens, I need to make sure they're okay." Frank's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown. He greeted me with a warm handshake and ushered us into his wood-paneled office. After listening to my explanation of the situation, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Margaret, the legal situation is quite straightforward. The house is yours, free and clear. The agreement they signed gives you the right to ask them to leave with 30 days' notice. But I sense this isn't just about asserting your property rights." I nodded, grateful for his perception. "It's about respect, Frank, and it's about my concern that Travis isn't being honest with my daughter. I saw a message today that suggests he might be having an affair." Frank's expression grew serious. "That complicates things emotionally, but not legally. Have you spoken with Jenny about your concerns?" "Not yet. She works such long hours, and when she's home, Travis is always there. I need to find a way to talk to her privately." "I suggest you start by asserting your boundaries clearly," Frank advised. "Don't move into the guest house. Make it clear that such a request is inappropriate given that you own the home. Then, find a way to speak with Jenny alone about your broader concerns." He pulled out a legal pad and began writing. I'm going to draft a formal letter reminding them of the terms of their stay. You don't have to use it, but having it might give you some peace of mind." As he wrote, I turned to Diane. "I feel like I'm betraying Jenny by doing this." Diane shook her head firmly. "You're not betraying her by refusing to be disrespected in your own home. And if Travis is cheating, you're certainly not betraying her by bringing that to light." By the time we left Frank's office, I had a clear plan and the legal documentation to back it up. Diane drove me to a cafe where we could talk further without risk of being overheard. "What are you going to do if you confirm he's cheating?" she asked as we settled into a corner booth. "I don't know," I admitted, stirring my tea absently. "Jenny loves him, despite his flaws, and the children adore their father." "Children are resilient," Diane reminded me. "And Jenny is stronger than you give her credit for. She's your daughter after all." When I returned home 3 hours later, the house was quiet except for the sound of the television in the living room. Travis was sprawled on the sofa, a beer in hand. He barely glanced up as I entered. "The kids are in bed," he said, as if he'd done me a favor. "Jenny called. She's working a double shift and won't be home until morning." I nodded, unsurprised. Jenny often picked up extra shifts to compensate for Travis's lack of income. "Thank you for letting me know. Did she say anything else?" Travis shifted uncomfortably. "She mentioned you might be upset about something." "Look, Margaret, I think you misunderstood what I was suggesting earlier. We don't want to push you out of your home. We just think the arrangement could work better for everyone. I will not be moving into the guest house. This is my home, and while I'm happy to have you, Jenny, and the children staying here temporarily, I won't be displaced." His expression hardened. "Jenny won't be happy to hear that. She thinks you're being selfish." Travis turned his attention back to the television, effectively dismissing me. As I stood to leave, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He lunged for it, but not before I caught another glimpse of that name Amber on the screen. "Good night, Travis," I said, heading toward my bedroom. "Oh, and just so you know, I've consulted with my attorney today about our living arrangement. He'll be sending over some documents for clarification." That got his attention. "Attorney? What the hell, Margaret? This is family business." "Precisely," I replied. "And families should treat each other with respect." I closed my bedroom door on his protests and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The confrontation I'd been avoiding for months was now inevitable. But first, I needed evidence. The next morning, I woke early and made breakfast for the children before they left for school. Jenny arrived home just as they were finishing, exhaustion evident in the dark circles under her eyes. "Mom," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Travis said you were upset about something?" "We can talk later," I told her, nodding toward the children. "You need rest. We'll discuss it when you wake up." She looked relieved and headed to bed without further conversation. Travis had already left for what he described as a job interview, though I noticed he'd taken his golf clubs. After the children were safely on the school bus, I returned to the kitchen and found Jenny's phone charging on the counter. She always left it out when she slept, in case the hospital needed to reach her for an emergency. I hesitated only briefly before picking it up. Under normal circumstances, I would never invade my daughter's privacy, but these weren't normal circumstances. Her password was the children's birthdays combined, something I'd seen her enter countless times. I opened her text messages and searched for any exchanges with Travis. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were dozens of messages where Jenny expressed concern about their finances, asked about job interviews, and generally sounded increasingly desperate. Travis's responses were short, dismissive, and often contained lies about where he was or what he was doing. But the most damning evidence came from her call history. Jenny had called a number labeled Travis office several times in the past week, only to be told by someone that no one by that name worked there. She'd made notes in her calendar app. Check T-Story Re, Westside Interview, and Call Amber Re, Golf Tournament? So Jenny was already suspicious. She wasn't as oblivious as Travis believed or as I had feared. I replaced the phone exactly as I'd found it and sat at the kitchen table, thinking. My daughter was investigating her husband's activities on her own. Should I confront her with what I knew, or wait for her to come to me? My decision was made for me when, just after noon, Jenny appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyes red from crying. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking, "I need to talk to you." I opened my arms, and she collapsed into them like she used to do as a child. For several minutes, she just sobbed against my shoulder while I stroked her hair. Finally, she pulled back and wiped her eyes. "I think Travis is cheating on me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I think he's been lying about looking for work. We're drowning in debt, Mom. The credit cards are maxed out, and he's been taking cash advances that I didn't know about until the statements came." I took her hands in mine. "Jenny, I've been concerned about Travis's behavior for a while now. Yesterday, I saw messages on his phone from someone named Amber." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Amber Phillips. She's the receptionist at the country club. I called there yesterday pretending to be looking for Travis for an emergency. The woman who answered said he was out on the course with her sister." She laughed bitterly. "He told me he was at a job interview." "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hands. "What do you want to do?" Jenny took a deep breath. "I don't know. The kids love him. And despite everything, I still love him too. But I can't keep living like this, working myself to exhaustion while he lies to my face. Yesterday, Travis suggested that I should move into the guest house so that you all could have the main house to yourselves." Jenny's eyes widened in shock. "What? Mom, I never agreed to that. That's absurd. This is your house." "He implied it was your idea as well," I told her. "I didn't believe it, but I wanted you to know what he said." "I can't believe he would." She stopped mid-sentence as the front door opened and closed. Travis was home. Jenny straightened up, quickly wiping her eyes. "Don't say anything yet," she whispered urgently. "I need to think about how to handle this." I nodded, respecting her wish. Travis strolled into the kitchen, his golf tan evident despite the supposed job interview. He stopped short when he saw Jenny. "You're up early," he said, a note of wariness in his voice. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Jenny replied, not meeting his eyes. "How was the interview?" Travis launched into an elaborate story about a promising meeting with a marketing firm, complete with details about the office and the people he'd supposedly met. I watched my daughter's face as she listened, saw the pain and disappointment in her eyes as she recognized the lies. "That sounds promising," she said when he finished. "Did they give you a timeline for their decision?" "They said they'd be in touch next week," Travis replied smoothly. "I think it went really well." Jenny nodded, then stood up. "I'm going to take a shower. Mom, we'll finish our conversation later?" "Of course, dear," I replied, watching as she left the kitchen with her shoulders squared and her head high. My daughter was stronger than I'd given her credit for. Travis opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer, popping the tab with a practiced motion. "What were you two talking about?" he asked casually. "Just catching up," I said, matching his tone. "Jenny works so much, we rarely get time alone together." He grunted in response and headed toward the living room, beer in hand. As I watched him go, I felt a surge of protective anger. This man had lied to my daughter, potentially cheated on her, and had the audacity to try to push me out of my own home. Something had to change. I reached for my phone and texted Diane. "It's worse than we thought. I need to move forward with Frank's plan." Her response came immediately. "I'm here for whatever you need. Just say the word." The word, I decided, would be eviction. But first, Jenny needed to make her own decision about her marriage. I wouldn't push her in either direction, but I would ensure she had all the facts and all the support she needed. As I sat at my kitchen table, planning my next move, I felt a strange sense of calm. For months, I'd been walking on eggshells in my own home, deferring to Travis to keep the peace for Jenny's sake. No more. It was time to reclaim my house and my dignity. And if Travis didn't like it, well, the guest house would still be available, but not for me. I spent the next 3 days watching Travis and Jenny circle each other like wary cats. Jenny picked up extra shifts at the hospital, not from necessity this time, but to avoid being home. Travis barely noticed, too engrossed in his phone and whatever secrets it contained. The children sensed the tension. Ellie grew quieter, while Max became uncharacteristically clingy, especially with me. On Thursday afternoon, I was helping Max with his kindergarten homework when my cell phone rang. It was Frank Harmon. "Margaret, I have those documents we discussed ready for your review," he said. "Would you like me to email them? Or would you prefer to come in? Tomorrow morning? Perfect. 10 o'clock. After hanging up, I texted Diane to see if she could watch the children after school the next day. Though Travis was theoretically available, he'd proven himself unreliable, often forgetting to pick them up or claiming last-minute networking opportunities that prevented him from caring for his own children. Diane responded immediately. "Of course. Should I take them to my place or come to yours?" "Mine, please," I replied. "I don't want to disrupt their routine any more than necessary." That evening, Jenny arrived home earlier than expected. She found me in the kitchen preparing dinner, a task that had fallen exclusively to me since they moved in, despite my subtle suggestions that Travis could help while job hunting. "Mom," she said quietly, glancing toward the living room where Travis was watching television with the children. "Can we talk? Privately?" I nodded and followed her upstairs to my bedroom. Jenny closed the door behind us and leaned against it, exhaustion etched across her face. "I checked our bank accounts today," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Travis has withdrawn nearly $4,000 in the past month. When I called him on it, he claimed it was for networking events and interview clothes." She laughed bitterly. $4,000, Mom? That's 2 months of mortgage payments on our old house, the house we're about to lose to foreclosure, because he can't be bothered to find a job. I sat on the edge of my bed, patting the space beside me. Jenny joined me, dropping her head into her hands. "Have you confronted him about her?" Jenny shook her head. "Not directly. I've asked where he's been, who he's been with. He lies so smoothly, Mom. Sometimes I think I'm crazy for doubting him." "You're not crazy," I assured her, taking her hand. "Trust your instincts. The worst part is, I think he's using our situation living here with you as leverage. He knows I can't afford a place on my own with the kids. Not with my salary and his unemployment. So he thinks I have to stay with him." She squeezed my hand. "And now he's trying to push you out of your own home." "About that," I said carefully, "I've been consulting with Frank Harmon about our living arrangement." Jenny looked alarmed. "You're not evicting us, are you?" "Mom, I know things are tense, but the kids—" No, I reassured her quickly. "I would never put you or the children out, but I am concerned about Travis's behavior and his apparent belief that he has some claim to my home." Relief washed over her face. "Thank goodness. I've been so worried about everything, and the thought of having to find a place right now." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "But I want you to know, I never agreed to asking you to move to the guest house. That was all Travis. I was horrified when he told me he'd suggested it." "I believed as much," I said, patting her hand. "Jenny, whatever you decide about your marriage, you and the children always have a home with me. I want you to know that." She leaned against my shoulder, just as she used to do as a child when she was upset. "I think I need to leave him, Mom, but I'm scared." "Of what, sweetheart?" "Travis hasn't contributed anything in months, but at least he watches the kids sometimes when I'm working. If I leave him, I'll need childcare for every shift." "One step at a time," I advised. "First, be certain of what you want. Then we can figure out the logistics together." She nodded against my shoulder. "I'm meeting with a divorce attorney next week, just to understand my options." "That's wise," I said, feeling a surge of pride in my daughter's strength. Knowledge is power. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, before Jenny spoke again. "What did Frank say about the house situation?" "He's prepared some documents clarifying the terms of your stay here. Nothing drastic, just a formal reminder that this is my home and I make the decisions about who lives where within it." Jenny nodded. "Good. Travis needs boundaries. He's gotten too comfortable taking advantage of your generosity." She stood up, squaring her shoulders. I should get back downstairs before he comes looking for us. Jenny, I said, stopping her as she reached for the door. I'm proud of you. You're handling a difficult situation with grace and courage. She gave me a watery smile. I learned from the best, Mom. After she left, I sat on my bed for a long while, thinking. My daughter was in pain, my grandchildren were confused, and my home had become a battleground of sorts. And at the center of it all was Travis, charming, manipulative Travis, who had somehow convinced my brilliant daughter to doubt her own perceptions. The next morning, I drove to Frank's office, while Travis was supposedly at another job interview. Frank greeted me warmly and ushered me into his office, where he presented me with several documents. I've prepared 3 options, he explained. The first is simply a formal letter reminding them of the terms of their stay and asserting your authority as the homeowner. The second is a more structured agreement with specific rules and expectations. And the third, he paused, sliding the final document across his desk, is a notice of eviction, which you can use if necessary. I'm hoping we won't need the third, at least not for Jenny and the children. Frank leaned back in his chair, studying me. Margaret, may I speak frankly? Of course. I've known you for 30 years. You've always been fair, generous, and perhaps too accommodating at times. But in this situation, I think you need to be prepared to take a harder line. From what you've told me, your son-in-law is taking advantage of both you and your daughter. I sighed. I know. But I'm trying to give Jenny space to make her own decisions about her marriage. Understandable, but you don't have to tolerate disrespect in your own home while she deliberates. He tapped the first document. This reminds Travis that he is a guest in your home, not an owner or tenant. It establishes clear boundaries without forcing Jenny's hand regarding their marriage. Thank you, Frank. He placed the document in a folder and handed it to me. Call me anytime if you need the others. And Margaret? Stand your ground. You've earned that right. When I returned home, Diane's car was in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen with Ellie and Max, baking cookies. Grandma, Max exclaimed, his face lighting up. We're making chocolate chip, your favorite. So I see, I said, smiling at the flour dusting his nose. Thank you for thinking of me. Diane gave me a knowing look over the children's heads. How did it go? Productively, I replied, setting my purse on the counter. Is Travis home? Haven't seen him, Diane said. But his golf clubs are gone from the hall closet. Of course they were. I checked my watch nearly 4 in the afternoon. Another day without job hunting, while Jenny worked a 12-hour shift to support the family. Grandma, Ellie said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. Are you and Daddy fighting? I knelt down to her level, meeting her worried eyes. What makes you ask that, sweetheart? I heard Daddy tell Mommy that you're being difficult and that you might make us leave. Her lower lip trembled. I don't want to leave. I like living with you. My heart clenched. So Travis was already planting seeds, trying to use the children as leverage. Ellie, this is my home, and you and Max and Mommy are always welcome here. Always. You don't need to worry about having to leave. What about Daddy? Max asked, picking up on the omission. I chose my words carefully. That depends on Daddy's choices. But no matter what happens, you will always have a home with me and with your mom. Diane skillfully redirected their attention back to the cookies, giving me a moment to compose myself. I was angrier than I'd been in years. Using the children as pawns was unconscionable. I was setting the table for dinner when Travis finally returned, smelling faintly of beer and wearing golf attire rather than interview clothes. Where are the kids? He asked, dropping his keys on the counter. In the den with Diane, I replied. They were asking some concerning questions earlier about whether they would have to leave. Travis had the grace to look uncomfortable. Kids pick up on tension. They're probably just sensing that things are strained between us. Or perhaps they overheard you telling Jenny that I might make you leave, I countered, keeping my voice level. He shrugged. I was just expressing concern about your recent attitude. Ever since you went to see that lawyer? Frank Harmon has been my attorney for decades. I interrupted. And yes, I consulted him about clarifying our living arrangement. In fact, I have something for you to review. I pulled the folder from my purse and handed it to him. Travis glanced at it suspiciously but didn't open it. What's this? A formal reminder of the terms of your stay in my home. Nothing has changed, it simply clarifies that this is my house, and I make the decisions about who lives where within it. His face darkened. This is ridiculous, Margaret. We're family, not tenants. Exactly. Your family staying in my home as guests, not as owners or tenants. And as guests, I expect a certain level of respect, which includes not telling me to move into my own guest house. Travis tossed the folder onto the counter without opening it. I don't need to read this legal mumbo-jumbo. Jenny and I will discuss it when she gets home. I've already discussed it with Jenny, I said calmly. She agrees that boundaries are necessary. Something flashed in his eyes, anger perhaps, or fear. You've been turning her against me. I've done nothing of the sort. Jenny is a grown woman capable of making her own observations and decisions. He stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate me. Listen, Margaret, I know you've never approved of me. You've always thought Jenny could do better. But she chose me, and we have a family together. So back off and let us handle our marriage without your interference. Is there? He challenged. Because it seems like you're trying to drive a wedge between us. First, with this legal nonsense, and now by filling Jenny's head with suspicions. Jenny's suspicions are her own, Travis. Perhaps you should ask yourself why your wife might be suspicious of your activities. His expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. What has she said to you? That's between Jenny and me, I replied. But I suggest you think carefully about your choices and their potential consequences. Travis opened his mouth to respond but was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Jenny was home early again. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her scrubs, taking in the scene before her, Travis and me facing off. The folder on the counter between us. What's going on? She asked warily. Your mother is trying to evict us, Travis said immediately, his tone aggrieved. Jenny looked at me questioningly. That's not true, I said calmly. I've simply provided a written reminder of our original agreement that you are welcome guests in my home, but it remains my home. Jenny nodded slowly. Can I see it? I handed her the folder, which she opened and read carefully. Travis watched her face, his own expression tense. This seems reasonable, Jenny said finally, closing the folder. It just restates what we already agreed to when we moved in. Travis looked betrayed. You're taking her side? There are no sides, Travis, Jenny said wearily. This is Mom's house. We're lucky she's letting us stay here while we get back on our feet. While we get back on our feet, Travis repeated mockingly. It's been 6 months, Jenny. How much longer do you expect me to keep looking for the perfect job? Jenny's eyes flashed. Any job would be a start. You haven't worked in half a year, while I'm pulling double shifts just to keep up with the bills you keep racking up. I quietly stepped back, moving toward the den to check on the children. This was a conversation they needed to have without my presence. As I left, I heard Travis's voice rise. So that's what this is really about? Money? I'm sorry I'm not the breadwinner you wanted, Jenny. I'm sorry I'm such a disappointment to both of you. I closed the den door behind me, finding Diane reading to the children on the sofa. She looked up questioningly. Adult conversation in the kitchen, I explained quietly. Let's give them some privacy. Diane nodded understandingly. Kids, how about we go out back and see if we can spot any fireflies? It's almost dark enough. Ellie and Max eagerly agreed, and Diane led them through the back door into the yard. I remained in the den, not wanting to intrude on Jenny and Travis, but also wanting to be available if needed. Through the door, I could hear their voices rising and falling, though not the specific words. After about 20 minutes, I heard the front door slam. Moments later, Jenny appeared in the den. Her eyes red, but her expression resolute. He left, she said simply. Said he needed space to think. I opened my arms, and she came to me, accepting the hug but not breaking down this time. Are you okay? I asked. She nodded against my shoulder. Actually, yes. I feel clearer than I have in months. I told him I know about Amber, about the lies, about the money. All of it. How did he respond? Denial, then anger, then blame. It was my fault for working so much. Your fault for turning me against him. The economy's fault for not providing suitable jobs. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Never his fault for lying, cheating, or refusing to take any job that wasn't at his previous salary level. What happens now? I asked gently. I don't know, she admitted. He took some clothes and said he needed time to think. I told him he could think all he wanted, but I was done being lied to. She glanced toward the back door. Are the kids outside? I nodded. Diane took them to look for fireflies. As Jenny headed upstairs, I went to the back door to call Diane and the children in for dinner. The evening that followed was surprisingly peaceful. We ate, played a board game, and then I helped Jenny put the children to bed. Neither Ellie nor Max asked about their father's absence, suggesting this wasn't the first time he'd disappeared after an argument. Later, as Jenny and I sat in the living room with cups of tea, she turned to me with a serious expression. Mom, I need to ask you something important. Of course, dear. If I go through with this, with divorcing Travis and the kids, and I stay here, just until I can save enough for our own place? I know it's a lot to ask, especially after you've already been so generous. Jenny, I said firmly, this is your home for as long as you need it. You and the children are always welcome here. Always. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. That makes everything else seem more manageable somehow. What about Travis? I asked carefully. If he wants to reconcile? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't think I can trust him again. The lies, the money, Amber, it's too much. And honestly, I'm not sure I even want to try. These past 6 months have shown me a side of him I can't unsee. I nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes clarity comes at a high emotional cost. And in the meantime, this is your home. Travis may come and go as your relationship dictates, but he needs to understand that he's here on my terms and with my permission. Jenny smiled tiredly. I think that message is finally getting through to him. The look on his face when I told him I knew everything. She shook her head. He's not used to being caught. We sat in companionable silence for a while before Jenny spoke again. You know what the strangest part is? I feel relieved. Like I've been carrying this enormous weight, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Now it's out in the open, and even though it hurts, it's also freeing. I understood that feeling all too well. After Robert's long illness, his death had brought a similar conflicted emotion, grief intertwined with a guilty sense of relief that the suffering was over. That's perfectly natural, I assured her. You've been living with uncertainty and deception for months. Truth, even painful truth, brings its own peace. Jenny yawned, the emotional day catching up with her. I should get some sleep. I have the early shift tomorrow. After she went upstairs, I locked up the house and prepared for bed myself. As I was turning off lights, I noticed Travis's golf clubs were still in the hall closet. He'd left in such a hurry that he'd forgotten his precious clubs, the ones he'd spent thousands on while claiming financial hardship. I closed the closet door with a sigh. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, at least, my home felt like my own again. The air itself seemed lighter somehow, cleansed of the tension that had been building for months. As I climbed into bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Everything okay? I typed back, getting there. Travis left after a confrontation with Jenny. She knows everything now. Diane's response came quickly. Good for her, and for you. Stand your ground, Margaret. You've earned that right. Frank had said almost the exact same thing earlier that day. Stand your ground. After months of compromising to keep the peace, of walking on eggshells in my own home, I was finally doing just that. It felt right. I fell asleep that night with a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead wouldn't be easy for any of us, especially the children. But at least we were now dealing with truth rather than deception. And in my experience, truth, however difficult, was always the better foundation. What I didn't expect was the call that came at 3:17 in the morning, jolting me from sleep. Travis's name flashed on my phone screen. "Margaret," he slurred when I answered, clearly intoxicated. "Tell Jenny I'm coming home. Tell her I'm sorry and I'm coming home." "Travis, it's the middle of the night," I said firmly. "Jenny and the children are asleep. This isn't the time." "Don't tell me when I can come to my own home," he snapped, his tone shifting abruptly from contrite to angry. "It's not your home, Travis," I reminded him, keeping my voice level despite the hour. "It's my home, and Jenny and the children are welcome here. You, however, need to sober up and reconsider your approach." He laughed bitterly. "So that's how it is? You're going to use your ownership of the house to control me? To keep me from my own family? I'm asking you to respect boundaries and to consider what's best for Jenny and the children right now. Coming home drunk in the middle of the night, isn't it?" "I'm coming anyway," he declared, "and you can't stop me." The call ended abruptly. I sat up in bed, fully awake now and concerned. Travis had never been physically aggressive, but his tone and his inebriated state worried me. I debated whether to wake Jenny, but decided against it. She needed her rest before her early shift. Instead, I called Diane, who answered on the second ring despite the hour. "Travis just called, drunk, saying he's coming over," I explained quickly. "I'm concerned about his state of mind. Call the non-emergency police line and let them know the situation. You don't want to be alone if he shows up intoxicated and belligerent." I followed her advice, explaining to the dispatcher that my intoxicated son-in-law had threatened to come to my home against my wishes. They promised to send an officer to do a drive-by check. Then I got dressed and went downstairs to wait, turning on lights as I went. If Travis was coming, I wanted him to know I was awake and prepared. I waited in the kitchen, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old hardwood floors. The digital clock on the microwave read 3:42. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows in a rhythm that would normally have been soothing. Tonight, it only heightened my anxiety. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "On my way over, don't face him alone." I smiled despite the situation. Diane had been my rock since Robert died, stepping in without hesitation whenever I needed support. Just knowing she was coming made me feel calmer. At 3:55, headlights swept across the living room as a car pulled into the driveway. I tensed, but it was only a police cruiser doing the promised drive-by. I watched from the window as the officer shone a spotlight briefly around the property before continuing down the street. 4:17. Still no sign of Travis. Perhaps he'd sobered up enough to reconsider, or maybe he'd simply passed out wherever he was staying. I was beginning to think he wouldn't show when I heard the unmistakable sound of a key in the front door lock. My heart jumped. I'd forgotten that Travis still had a house key. The door swung open, and there he stood, silhouetted against the porch light. Even from a distance, I could see he was unsteady on his feet. "Travis," I said firmly, moving into the entryway. "This isn't appropriate. You need to leave." "She's asleep, and she has an early shift. This can wait until tomorrow when you're sober." He took a step forward, and I caught the strong smell of whiskey. "I'm not leaving until I talk to her. This is my family, Margaret. My family." "Lower your voice," I warned. "The children are sleeping, and this conversation can happen tomorrow at a reasonable hour." "Don't tell me when I can see my own wife," he snapped, his voice rising despite my warning. "You've been turning her against me for months, filling her head with suspicions. Well, guess what? I'm not going to let you destroy my marriage." I stood my ground, blocking his path to the stairs. "Travis, you've been drinking. You're not thinking clearly. Go back to wherever you're staying, get some sleep, and come back tomorrow when you're sober." He laughed bitterly. "You'd like that, wouldn't you? For me to just disappear so you can have Jenny and the kids all to yourself. The perfect little family without the inconvenient husband." "That's not true, and you know it. I've supported your family for 6 months without complaint. What I won't support is you coming into my home, drunk in the middle of the night, disturbing everyone's sleep." His face darkened. "You're home. You're home. That's all I hear from you lately. Well, maybe it's time we discussed whose home this really is. Before I could respond, headlights flashed through the front windows as another car pulled into the driveway. Diane had arrived. Travis glanced toward the door, momentarily distracted. Who's that? Did you call the cops on me? It's Diane, I said calmly. And yes, I did call the non-emergency line because I was concerned about your state of mind. The front door opened, and Diane stepped in, taking in the scene with a quick glance. At 63, she still carried herself with the authority of her years on the bench. Everything okay here, Margaret? She asked, though her eyes never left Travis. Just a disagreement about timing, I replied. Travis wants to speak with Jenny now. I've suggested he come back in the morning when everyone is rested. It's 4:30 in the morning, Travis, Diane said reasonably. The children need their sleep, and so does Jenny before her shift. Why don't you come back at a more appropriate hour? Don't patronize me, he snapped. I know what you two think of me. Poor Jenny, married to such a loser. Poor Jenny, stuck with a husband who can't provide for his family. No one said that, I began, but he cut me off with a dismissive wave. You didn't have to say it. It's written all over both your faces every time you look at me. He took another unsteady step forward. Well, I'm not going anywhere. This is my family, and I have a right to be here. Actually, Diane said, her voice taking on the firm tone she'd used in her courtroom. Legally speaking, you don't have that right. This house belongs to Margaret. She can decide who stays here and who doesn't. Travis's face contorted with anger. So that's how it's going to be? You're going to use your ownership of this house to keep me from my wife and children? No one is keeping you from your family, I said calmly. I'm asking you to come back at a reasonable hour when you're sober. Mom? Jenny's voice came from the top of the stairs. She stood there in her robe, looking down at the scene in the entryway. What's going on? Travis immediately changed his demeanor, his voice softening. Jenny, baby, I came to apologize. I was wrong. About everything. Please, can we talk? Jenny descended the stairs slowly, her expression wary. You're drunk, Travis. I had a few drinks, he admitted, but I'm thinking clearly now. I want to make things right between us. Jenny reached the bottom of the stairs and stood beside me. I could feel her trembling slightly, though her voice remained steady. It's the middle of the night. I have to be at work in 2 hours. This isn't the time. When is the time, Jenny? He demanded, his conciliatory tone evaporating. You're always working, always too busy for me. And when you are home, you're huddled with your mother, plotting against me. No one is plotting against you, Jenny said tiredly. But you're right about one thing. I am always working, because someone has to pay the bills. Travis flinched as if she'd slapped him. So that's what this is really about? Money? I told you I'm trying to find the right opportunity. It's not just about money, Jenny replied. It's about honesty, responsibility, partnership. She took a deep breath. And faithfulness. Travis's expression shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing his face before he masked it with indignation. What are you talking about? Amber, Jenny said simply. And the $4,000 you've withdrawn in the past month, and the networking events that somehow always happen when I'm working nights. For a moment, Travis seemed at a loss for words. Then his gaze hardened as he looked at me. You've been spying on me? Going through my phone? No one needed to spy on you, Jenny said before I could respond. You left a trail a mile wide. The bank statements. The receipts in your golf bag. The lipstick on your collar last week, really, Travis? That's such a cliché. He ran a hand through his hair, his bravado faltering. Jenny, it's not what you think. Amber is just a friend who's been helping me network. Stop lying, Jenny said, her voice breaking slightly. Just stop. I called the country club, Travis. I know she doesn't even work there. Her sister does. Travis's face paled. For the first time, he seemed to realize how much Jenny actually knew. I think you should leave now, Diane said into the uncomfortable silence. Come back tomorrow when you're sober, and you can discuss this like adults. Travis looked from Jenny to me to Diane, seemingly weighing his options. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine. But this isn't over. We need to talk, Jenny. Really talk. Tomorrow, Jenny agreed. After my shift. He nodded, then turned and walked unsteadily to the door. Before leaving, he looked back at Jenny. I do love you, you know, and the kids. Whatever you think of me, that's always been true. After he left, the three of us stood in silence for a moment. Jenny was the first to speak. I'm sorry he woke you, Mom. And you too, Diane. You shouldn't have to deal with this. Nonsense, Diane said briskly. That's what friends are for. Now, you should try to get a little more sleep before your shift. In the kitchen, Jenny went through the motions of making coffee, her movements mechanical. I sat at the table, watching her carefully. Are you okay? I asked when the silence had stretched too long. She shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I thought I was prepared for this conversation. I've been rehearsing it in my head for weeks. But seeing him standing there, drunk and defensive, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It just made it all so real. I went to her, wrapping my arms around her as she cried quietly against my shoulder. It's okay to be sad, I told her. Even when you know it's the right decision, ending a marriage is painful. She pulled back, wiping her eyes again. The worst part is, I still love him. Or at least, I love who I thought he was. The man I married wouldn't have done any of this. People change, I said gently. Sometimes in ways we never expected. The coffee maker beeped, and Jenny pulled away to pour us each a cup. We sat at the table, the early morning darkness pressing against the windows. What will you say to him tomorrow? I asked after a while. Jenny stared into her coffee. I don't know. Part of me wants to give him another chance, for the kids' sake. But another part knows this pattern will just repeat itself. He'll be contrite for a while, then slowly slip back into the same behaviors. But Jenny, you deserve someone who respects you, who contributes to your partnership, who's faithful, whether that's a reformed Travis or someone else entirely. She nodded slowly. I know. And the kids deserve a father who's present, who models responsibility and honesty. She looked up at me, her eyes still shimmering with tears but also with resolve. I think I need to move forward with the divorce. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then that's what you'll do, and you won't be doing it alone. Jenny left for her shift at 6:30, and I tried to get a little more sleep before the children woke up. It was a Saturday, which meant no school, and I wanted to be rested enough to keep them occupied and distracted from their father's absence. Diane was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs at 8, making pancakes with Ellie while Max set the table. Grandma! Max exclaimed when he saw me. Diane is making pancakes with chocolate chips and blueberries. That sounds delicious, I said, giving him a hug. Thank you for setting the table so nicely. Ellie looked up from her pancake flipping duties. Where's Daddy? Is he still sleeping? Diane and I exchanged glances. Your daddy isn't here this morning, I said carefully. He and Mommy need some time to figure things out, so he's staying somewhere else for a little while. Ellie's face fell. Is it because they were fighting? Sometimes grown-ups need space to think, I explained, sitting down at the table and motioning for her to join me. It doesn't mean they don't love you. Your daddy and Mommy both love you and Max very much. But they're getting a divorce, aren't they? Ellie asked, her voice small. Like Zoe's parents. She had to move to a new house and only sees her dad on weekends now. My heart ached for her. At 7, she was old enough to understand the concept of divorce and to have friends whose parents had separated. I don't know what they'll decide, I said honestly, but I do know that whatever happens, you and Max will always be loved and taken care of. Max climbed into my lap, his small face serious. If Daddy doesn't live with us anymore, will we still see him? Of course you will, I assured him. He's your daddy, and he loves you very much. The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Diane went to answer it while I stayed with the children. A moment later, she returned with a troubled expression. It's Travis, she said quietly. He wants to see the kids. I glanced at the clock, not even 9 in the morning. Is he sober? Diane nodded. Seems to be. Says he brought breakfast, but I told him we're already making pancakes. Ellie and Max had perked up at the mention of their father. Can we see Daddy? Ellie asked eagerly. I hesitated, unsure of the right move. On one hand, Travis was their father and had a right to see them. On the other, I didn't want to undermine Jenny's authority or create confusion for the children. Travis was waiting in the living room, looking considerably more put together than he had a few hours ago. He'd showered and changed clothes, though his eyes were bloodshot from either alcohol or lack of sleep, possibly both. Travis, I greeted him neutrally. The children are having breakfast. I brought donuts, he said, holding up a pink box. Their favorites. Chocolate with sprinkles for Ellie, glazed for Max. That was thoughtful, I acknowledged. But before you see them, we need to be clear about something. Jenny will be making decisions about your marriage when she gets home from her shift. Until then, I don't want the children confused or caught in the middle. Travis's expression hardened slightly. They're my kids, Margaret. I have a right to see them. I'm not saying you can't see them. I'm asking you to be mindful of what you say to them. They're already asking if you and Jenny are getting divorced. He paled at that. What did you tell them? The truth, that I don't know what you and Jenny will decide, but that you both love them very much. Travis nodded slowly. That's fair. I just want to spend some time with them. I won't say anything to upset them or undermine Jenny. I studied him for a moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. Despite everything, I believed he did love his children. All right, they're in the kitchen with Diane. We're having pancakes, but I'm sure they'll be happy to have donuts for dessert. He followed me to the kitchen, where Ellie and Max greeted him with enthusiastic hugs. Daddy, you brought donuts, Max exclaimed, eyeing the pink box. I sure did, buddy, Travis said, his voice softening as he knelt to their level. But I hear Diane's making her famous pancakes, so maybe we'll save these for later. The next hour was surprisingly pleasant. Travis was on his best behavior, helping the children with their pancakes, asking about their week at school, and generally being the engaged father he could be when he tried. Diane and I exchanged occasional glances, but said little, allowing him this time with his children. After breakfast, Travis suggested taking the kids to the park. It's a beautiful day, he said. We could feed the ducks, maybe get ice cream afterward. I hesitated. Jenny will be home around 3. She's expecting to talk with you then. We'll be back by 2, Travis promised. I just want some time with them, Margaret, please. Again, I found myself in a difficult position. I had no legal right to prevent Travis from taking his own children to the park, but I was also conscious of Jenny's wishes and the children's emotional well-being. All right, I agreed finally. But please have them back by 2 and keep your cell phone on. Travis nodded gratefully. Thank you. We won't be late. After they left, Diane helped me clean up the kitchen. Do you think that was wise? She asked quietly. I sighed. I don't know. But he is their father, and he hasn't done anything to warrant keeping them from him. Not yet, anyway. You're right, Diane conceded. And he did seem genuinely interested in spending time with them, not just using them as pawns. That's what I'm hoping, I said, though a nagging worry remained. Jenny's meeting with a divorce attorney next week. Things could get complicated quickly. Diane squeezed my shoulder. One day at a time, Margaret. That's all any of us can do. With the house suddenly quiet, I found myself at loose ends. I tried reading, then tackling a crossword puzzle, but my mind kept returning to Jenny and the difficult conversation awaiting her when she returned from her shift. Around noon, my cell phone rang. It was Jenny. Mom, she said, her voice tight with tension. Is Travis with the kids? Yes, he came by this morning and took them to the park. They should be back by 2. Is everything okay? She was quiet for a moment. I just got a call from American Express. Travis tried to buy plane tickets this morning. 4 tickets to his parents' place in Arizona. The card was declined because we're over the limit. but the fraud department called to verify the purchase. My blood ran cold. 4 tickets? For him and the children? And Amber, Jenny confirmed, her voice breaking. He was planning to take my children across the country without telling me. I gripped the phone tighter. Jenny, what do you want me to do? Don't call or text Travis. I don't want him to know we're onto him. Of course, I agreed. Drive safely. After hanging up, I immediately called Diane, who had left after breakfast but promised to return if needed. Travis tried to buy plane tickets for himself, the children, and his girlfriend. I explained rapidly. Jenny's on her way home now. While waiting, I paced the living room, alternating between worry and anger. How dare he try to take the children without Jenny's knowledge or consent? And to bring his girlfriend along, as if they were already one big happy family? The audacity was breathtaking. Jenny arrived first, still in her scrubs, her face pale but determined. Any word from them? She asked as soon as she entered. Nothing, I said. But he promised to have them back by 2. She checked her watch. 12:30. I'm calling him. She put the phone on speaker as it rang. Travis answered on the 3rd ring, children's laughter audible in the background. Hey, he said, sounding relaxed. Everything okay? Where are you? Jenny asked, her voice remarkably controlled. At the park, like I told your mom. The kids are having a blast. We're about to get ice cream. Travis, I need you to bring the children home right now. There was a pause. Why? What's wrong? American Express called me, Jenny said flatly, about the plane tickets you tried to purchase this morning. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Travis spoke, his voice defensive. I can explain that. I'm sure you can, Jenny replied, and you'll have the opportunity after you bring my children home, now. Jenny, don't overreact. It wasn't what you think. 4 tickets, Travis, to Arizona, for you, the kids, and Amber. Her voice finally broke on the last word. How exactly am I misinterpreting that? We'll talk then. After he hung up, Jenny collapsed onto the sofa, her hands shaking. He was going to take them, she whispered. Just take them and disappear. I sat beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. But he didn't. The card was declined, and now we know the children are safe. The doorbell rang. Diane had arrived. I let her in and quickly explained the situation. Her expression grew grave. You need to call your attorney right now, she advised Jenny. Today, this changes everything. Jenny nodded numbly, pulling out her phone. I have her number from the consultation. While she made the call in the kitchen, Diane turned to me. This is attempted parental kidnapping, Margaret. It's a serious offense. I know, I said quietly. I just can't believe he would do this to Jenny, to the children. Desperate people make desperate choices, Diane observed. And Travis is clearly desperate. He's losing his wife, his home, and potentially custody of his children. In his mind, this might have seemed like his only option. Jenny returned, looking slightly calmer. My attorney is meeting us at her office at 4. She's already drafting an emergency custody order based on flight risk. Good, Diane said approvingly. You need to protect yourself and the children legally. We fell into an uneasy silence, waiting for Travis to return with the children. The minutes ticked by slowly, tension building with each passing moment. At 1:15, we heard a car pull into the driveway. Jenny was on her feet immediately, moving to the front door. Diane and I followed, standing slightly behind her as she opened it. Travis stood there, holding Max's hand while Ellie clung to his leg. His expression was a mixture of defiance and resignation. We need to talk, he said to Jenny, ignoring Diane and me completely. Yes, we do, Jenny agreed, her voice steady. Kids, Grandma has a special project for you in the den while Daddy and I have a grown-up conversation. Ellie looked between her parents, clearly sensing the tension. Are you going to fight again? No, sweetheart, Jenny assured her, though her eyes never left Travis's face. We're just going to talk. I stepped forward, holding out my hands to the children. Come on, you two. I've been saving a special craft project just for today. Reluctantly, they let go of their father and took my hands. As I led them toward the den, I heard Jenny say to Travis, "In the kitchen, now. You should be there for Jenny." I nodded gratefully and returned to the kitchen, where Jenny and Travis stood on opposite sides of the island, like boxers in their corners before a fight. "Plane tickets, Travis?" Jenny was saying, her voice low but intense. "You were going to take our children across the country without telling me, with your girlfriend?" Travis's face was a mask of defiance, but I could see the panic in his eyes. "It wasn't like that," he insisted. "It was going to be a short trip. I was going to call you once we got there." "After the fact?" Jenny's voice rose slightly before she controlled it again, conscious of the children in the next room. "You were going to take my children to Arizona with your girlfriend and tell me after you'd already done it?" "They're my children too," Travis countered. "And Amber wasn't it's not what you think." "Then what is it, Travis? Explain to me how purchasing 4 plane tickets without telling me, right after I confronted you about your affair, could possibly be innocent." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his tell when he was about to lie. "I was scared, okay? You were talking about divorce, about taking the kids." I panicked. "I thought if I could just get them to my parents' place, we could all calm down and talk rationally." "With Amber?" Jenny added flatly. Travis flushed. "She was helping me. She has experience with custody issues from her own divorce." Jenny laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "So your girlfriend was helping you plan a strategy to get custody of our children? And that strategy involved taking them across state lines without my knowledge or consent?" "She's not my girlfriend," Travis protested weakly. "Stop lying!" Jenny slammed her palm on the counter, making us all jump. "I know about the affair, Travis. I have proof credit card receipts for hotel rooms, text messages, eyewitness accounts from people who've seen you together. Just stop." The silence that followed was deafening. Travis seemed to deflate before our eyes, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," he said finally. "Yes, Amber and I have been seeing each other, but it only started after things were already bad between us. You were always working, always too tired." "Don't you dare blame me for your choices," Jenny interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. "I was working to support our family because you refused to take any job that didn't match your previous salary. I was exhausted because I was carrying the entire financial and domestic burden while you played golf and networked." Travis had no response to that. He stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact with any of us. "I've consulted with my attorney," Jenny continued after a moment. "She's preparing an emergency custody order based on flight risk. After what you tried to do today, no judge will give you unsupervised visitation." Travis's head snapped up, panic replacing the defiance in his expression. "You can't do that. They're my kids too, Jenny. I love them." "I know you do," she said, her tone softening slightly. "But love isn't enough. You need to be trustworthy, and right now, you're not. You were willing to traumatize our children by taking them away from their mother, their school, their friends, all to punish me for confronting you about your affair." "It wasn't like that," he insisted again, but his protest sounded hollow even to my ears. "Then how was it, Travis? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were willing to use our children as pawns in whatever game you're playing." He had no answer. The kitchen fell silent again, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Travis spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me, Jenny?" "I want a divorce," she said simply. "I want full custody of the children, with supervised visitation for you until you can prove you're trustworthy. I want child support based on your earning potential, not your current unemployment. And I want you to move out of my mother's house today." Travis looked at me then, as if suddenly remembering I was there. "Margaret, please. Talk to her. This is our family we're talking about." I shook my head. "This is between you and Jenny. But I will say that I agree with her assessment of the situation. What you tried to do today was unconscionable." "So that's it?" he asked bitterly. "You're both just writing me off? After everything we've been through together?" "You wrote yourself off," Jenny replied. "Every time you lied. Every time you cheated. Every time you chose your own selfish desires over your family's needs. And especially today, when you try to steal our children. Travis's expression hardened. Fine, if that's how you want to play this, fine. But don't think I'm just going to roll over. I have rights too. Yes, you do, Jenny agreed. And my attorney will be in touch with yours to discuss those rights within the legal framework of our divorce proceedings. In the meantime, I need you to pack your things and leave. Today. And if I refuse? Travis challenged, looking at me again. This is still a family residence. You can't just kick me out without proper notice. I stepped forward then, my patience finally exhausted. Actually, Travis, I can. The agreement you signed when you moved in specifically states that your stay here is at my discretion. And after today's events, I am exercising my right to revoke that permission. That agreement isn't legally binding, he scoffed. Any court would recognize our tenant rights after 6 months of residence. That's where you're wrong, I said calmly. Frank Harmon, my attorney, specifically drafted that agreement to prevent exactly this situation. You are not a tenant, you are a guest. And your invitation has been rescinded. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. He stalked out of the kitchen toward the stairs. Jenny exhaled shakily once he was out of earshot. Thank you, Mom, for backing me up. Always, I assured her, squeezing her hand. Should one of us go upstairs to make sure he doesn't take anything he shouldn't? Can you stay with the kids? I don't want them to see him like this. Of course. As Jenny followed Travis upstairs, Diane joined me in the kitchen. That went about as well as could be expected, she observed. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I said automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, that's not true. I'm angry, furious really. How could he do this to them? To those sweet children? Entitlement, Diane said simply. Travis has always believed the rules don't apply to him, that he deserves special treatment. When reality doesn't match his expectations, he lashes out or tries to change the rules of the game. Well, the game is over now, I said firmly. He's not welcome in this house anymore. Upstairs, I could hear muffled voices, Jenny and Travis continuing their argument as he packed. I worried briefly about leaving them alone together, but Jenny was more than capable of standing her ground. Still, I kept an ear tuned to the sounds from above, ready to intervene if needed. In the den, Ellie and Max were engrossed in the craft project I'd hastily set up, decorating picture frames with seashells we'd collected during our beach trip last summer. They worked quietly, occasionally whispering to each other, clearly aware that something serious was happening but unsure exactly what. Grandma, Ellie said suddenly, looking up from her frame. Is Daddy going away again? I sat down beside her, choosing my words carefully. Your daddy needs to live somewhere else for a while, but he still loves you very much, and he'll still see you. Because he and Mommy are getting a divorce? She pressed, her young face solemn. That's something your Mommy and Daddy are figuring out, I replied, not wanting to confirm anything before Jenny had a chance to speak with them properly. But no matter what happens, they both love you and Max more than anything in the world. Max looked up at the mention of his name. Will we still live here with you, Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. You and your Mommy and Ellie will still live here with me for as long as you want to. This seemed to satisfy them, and they returned to their craft project. Children were remarkably resilient, I reflected. As long as they felt secure in the love of their family, they could adapt to changing circumstances. The sound of footsteps on the stairs signaled Travis's descent. I rose and went to the doorway of the den, positioning myself where I could see him, but the children couldn't easily see past me. Travis appeared at the bottom of the stairs, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a smaller bag in his hand. Jenny followed a few steps behind him, her expression carefully neutral. I want to say goodbye to the kids, Travis said, his voice subdued. Jenny hesitated, then nodded. Keep it brief and positive. They don't need to be dragged into adult issues. Travis approached the den, and I stepped aside to let him pass. Ellie and Max looked up, their faces lighting up at the sight of their father. Daddy, Max exclaimed, running to him. Look at my picture frame. It has shells on it. Travis knelt down, setting his bags aside to examine the frame. That's awesome, buddy. Really creative. Ellie approached more cautiously. Are you leaving, Daddy? Where will you live? She asked. Practical, even at 7. I'm going to stay with Uncle Steve for now, Travis replied, referring to a friend of his from the golf club. He has a spare room that's all ready for me. Can we visit you there? Max asked eagerly. Travis glanced at Jenny, who stood in the doorway watching the exchange. We'll figure that out soon, he said carefully. But for now, I need you both to be good for your mom and grandma, okay? Can you do that for me? They both nodded solemnly. Travis hugged them tightly, closing his eyes as if trying to memorize the feeling. I love you both so much, he whispered. Don't ever forget that. After your meeting with the attorney. She nodded. We'll talk then. I walked him to the front door, maintaining a respectful distance. At the threshold, he paused and turned to me. I know you think I'm the villain here, Margaret, but I do love them, all of them. I believe you do, in your way, I replied. But love without respect, without honesty, without responsibility, that's not enough. It never has been. He had no response to that. With a final nod, he walked out the door and down the path to his car. I watched until he drove away, feeling a complex mixture of emotions: relief that he was gone, sadness for the pain my daughter and grandchildren were experiencing, and a quiet anger that still simmered beneath the surface. When I returned to the den, Jenny was sitting on the floor between the children, helping them with their craft project. Her eyes met mine over Ellie's head, and I saw both grief and resolve in her gaze. We would get through this, all of us, together. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, tearful conversations, and adjustments to our new reality. Jenny filed for divorce and was granted the emergency custody order, limiting Travis to supervised visitation twice a week. He fought it initially, hiring an aggressive attorney who made all sorts of threats, but when Jenny's lawyer presented evidence of the attempted plane tickets and his affair, his position weakened considerably. Travis's parents called from Arizona, distraught over the situation. Contrary to what Travis had implied, they had no idea he was planning to bring the children there. In fact, they were horrified by his actions, and assured Jenny they would never have participated in such a scheme. They asked if they could still see their grandchildren, and Jenny graciously agreed, even offering to facilitate video calls until they could visit in person. Financially, things were tight but manageable. Jenny continued working her regular shifts at the hospital, no longer picking up the excessive overtime she'd needed when supporting Travis as well. I watched the children when she worked, grateful for the opportunity to provide this practical support. Slowly, a new routine emerged that was actually less stressful than when Travis had been part of the household. 1 month after Travis moved out, Jenny received a registered letter. She opened it at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. Oh my God! She gasped, her eyes widening as she read. What is it? I asked, setting down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables. It's from Travis's former company, she explained, scanning the letter. Apparently, he didn't just get laid off like he told me. He was fired for cause for embezzlement. They're giving me the courtesy of advance notice that they're pressing criminal charges against him. I sat down heavily across from her. Embezzlement? How much? Almost $200,000, she whispered, her face pale. Over the course of 3 years. They have bank records showing large deposits to accounts in his name that correspond with missing funds from client accounts he managed. Did you have any idea? I asked gently. She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. None. He always handled our finances. He told me his bonuses were the reason we could afford our lifestyle. She laughed bitterly. I guess, in a way they were. The implications were staggering. Not only had Travis been unfaithful and attempted to take the children, but he'd also been stealing from his employer for years. The man Jenny had married, the man she thought she knew, was a fiction. What will happen now? I asked. According to this, they're working with the district attorney to file charges. Travis will likely be arrested within the week. She set the letter down, her hands shaking slightly. How am I going to explain this to the children? One day at a time. I advised, the same words Diane had offered me weeks earlier. They don't need all the details right now, just that Daddy made some mistakes and has to face the consequences. Jenny nodded, wiping away a tear. I keep thinking I've hit the bottom of this nightmare, and then it gets worse. I moved to her side of the table, putting an arm around her shoulders. But you're handling it with incredible strength and grace. I'm so proud of you, Jenny. She leaned against me, taking comfort in the familiar gesture. I couldn't do it without you, Mom. Having a safe place for the kids and me. Having your support, it's everything. The arrest made local news. Travis's former company was well known in the community, and the story of a financial advisor embezzling from client accounts was too juicy for the media to ignore. Jenny kept the children away from television and newspapers, but she couldn't shield them from the whispers at school. Ellie came home in tears one day because a classmate had told her that her daddy was a bad man who stole money. That evening, Jenny sat the children down for an age-appropriate but honest conversation about their father's situation. I stayed nearby, ready to support if needed, but Jenny handled it beautifully. Daddy made some bad choices, she explained gently. He took money that didn't belong to him, and now he has to face the consequences of that choice. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person, and it definitely doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Will he go to jail? Ellie asked, her young face serious. Jenny nodded. Yes, probably. For a while. Can we visit him there? Max wanted to know. We'll see, Jenny said, not making promises she couldn't keep. But we can definitely write letters and maybe talk on the phone. The children absorbed this information with a remarkable resilience of youth. They had questions, concerns, moments of sadness, but they were adjusting. Having the stability of our home, the consistency of our love and support, made all the difference. Travis ultimately accepted a plea deal 5 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 3, plus restitution to his former employer. Before beginning his sentence, he requested a visit with the children. Jenny agreed, arranging for it to take place at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor present. I drove her and the children to the meeting, waiting in the car while they went inside. 2 hours later, they emerged, the children subdued but not distraught. Jenny looked emotionally drained but composed. How did it go? I asked, as they climbed into the car. About as well as could be expected, Jenny replied. He apologized to them, told them he loved them, and would write to them every week. They were shy at first, but warmed up enough to tell him about school and their activities. And how are you feeling? I asked, glancing at her in the rear-view mirror as I drove. No more lies, no more pretending, no more walking on eggshells. In the back seat, Ellie and Max had fallen asleep, exhausted by the emotional day. Jenny turned to look at them, her expression softening. They'll be okay, she said, more to herself than to me. We'll all be okay. And they were. In the months that followed, our household found a new rhythm. Jenny was promoted to charge nurse, a position that came with better pay and more regular hours. The children thrived in school and their activities. The divorce was finalized without contest, given Travis's incarceration, and Jenny was awarded full custody with provisions for supervised contact when he was released. 1 year to the day after Travis moved out, we sat in the backyard, watching Ellie and Max play on the swing set Robert had built for Jenny when she was their age. Diane was there too, along with a few other friends who had supported us through the difficult year. I've been thinking, Jenny said, sipping her lemonade, about finding our own place. I felt a pang at the thought of them leaving, though I'd always known this arrangement wasn't permanent. You know you're welcome here as long as you want to stay, I said carefully. She smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I know, Mom, and we've needed this sanctuary more than I can express. But I think it's time for us to stand on our own again, not too far away though. I've been looking at that duplex on Maple Street, just 3 blocks over. Close enough for daily visits, I observed, returning her smile. And spontaneous sleepovers with Grandma, she added. The kids would insist on that anyway. As if on cue, Ellie called from the swing set. Grandma, watch how high I can go. I waved, watching as she pumped her legs energetically, soaring higher and higher. Max, not to be outdone, was attempting the same on the swing beside her, his little legs working furiously. "They're so resilient," Diane remarked, following my gaze. "Children adapt to change much better than we give them credit for, especially when they're surrounded by love and stability." "They get that from their mother," I said proudly. "Jenny has shown them what real strength looks like this past year." Jenny blushed at the compliment. "I had a good example," she said, smiling at me. "You taught me that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about how you get back up again." As the afternoon sun bathed the yard in golden light, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past year had brought challenges I never expected to face at 60 years old, confronting my son-in-law, supporting my daughter through divorce and scandal, helping my grandchildren understand their father's absence. But it had also brought unexpected gifts: a deeper relationship with Jenny, precious time with Ellie and Max, and the quiet satisfaction of standing my ground when it mattered most. Travis had told me I wasn't welcome in my own home, had tried to push me into the guest house to make room for his vision of what our family should be. Instead, he had found himself evicted not just from my house, but from the life he'd built on lies and deception. The tables had turned indeed, not through vindictiveness or revenge, but through the simple power of truth and boundaries. As I watched my family enjoy the beautiful day, I silently thanked Robert for the wisdom he'd shared during our 35 years together. "Never let anyone make you feel small in your own space," he used to say. "Your home is your sanctuary, and you get to decide who shares it with you." I had honored that wisdom, protected my sanctuary, and in doing so, provided one for my daughter and grandchildren when they needed it most. There would be challenges ahead, there always were in life, but we would face them together. In this home that had weathered so many storms and still stood strong.